Hi, I'm really happy to be here. My name is Elena Perez. I am going to be moderating this session. It's Diversity Abroad BIPOC, so it's looking at Black, Indigenous, and people of color experiences abroad with a number of international grants. And so we have wonderful candidates with us today, or awardees with us here today, and I'm so glad that everybody was able to make it. I want to introduce each individual. I want to let them introduce themselves because we have some really phenomenal individuals joining us today. So first, I'd like to start with Sasha Daniels. Sasha, if you could share with us just briefly which award you won, where you went, what you did, and what you're up to now.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sasha Daniels. I use she, they pronouns. I am a 3-time U.S. State Department scholar. So I won the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange scholarship to go to Germany. I also won the Gilman to go to Japan. And then I won the Fulbright to go to Germany again. I am currently a master's student at the University of Texas at Austin, and I'm studying Germanic studies.
Very cool. Thank you. And Elizabeth Garcia, if you can go ahead and introduce yourself and your background.
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Raquel Garcia, and I was a first-gen low-income student turned 4-time international scholar. I won the Gilman to go to Chile for a study abroad for a total of a year. And I also studied abroad in Brazil and Mexico, and also participated in a special program hosted by the Mexican government to help students of Mexican descent reconnect with their cultural roots. I use she, they pronouns, and I also just want to mention that I was invited to the panel. This is particularly for BIPOC people, and I have a very clear understanding and respect for people who both identify me as a person of color and those who do not. I keep getting invited to BIPOC panels, but I have this understanding myself. So here I am today, and I hope to offer a unique perspective, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, Elizabeth. And Anissa is joining us. Unfortunately, right now, Anissa is struggling with the muting and unmuting on the mobile device. So she's working to get that resolved. She's going to be listening in on the conversation, and if she can unmute herself, we would love to have her join. But just so you know, Anissa is a Critical Language Studies Indonesian awardee for 2015-2016 and a 2019 Fulbright Student Research Grantee to Malaysia. And she's inspired by her mother's Indonesian heritage. So she applied to that critical language studies to improve her language skills, and also that opportunity to learn about the firsthand stories and connections to local communities in that environment. So she earned her master's in global environmental policy from American University School of International Service in Washington, D.C. And she explored the nexus between environmental governance and private sector engagement within the agribusiness industry. And we are hoping that Anissa will be able to work on the technological issues of our life and our pandemic life, so that we can have more insight from her. But I really welcome everyone today, because we're going to be just diving into the Black, Indigenous and person of color experience abroad. And it's important to recognize that these aren't going to be the same experiences. It really depends on the context, and even it's not going to even be the same experience with the same person day to day. It really depends on the environment, the context, where you're going to study, and a number of other things. So what we're going to do is learn from the individuals joining us today to see if they have any tools, resources, suggestions, what their experiences were like, because we can learn from each other. And so I'm going to start just with the first question, and that is, how did being Black, Indigenous, person of color, so how did people perceive you? And how about we go with Sasha first?
Yeah, so definitely in both countries that I would travel to, so Germany and Japan, automatically I was perceived the other. I didn't necessarily, everyone assumed that I was foreign because of the way I look. So in Germany, people would automatically assume that I was from Africa. In Japan, no one really knew what to assume. They just knew I obviously wasn't Japanese. So it affected how people saw me, and definitely got a lot of like looks, stares, questions about where I come from. So yeah, definitely has an effect.
Yeah, yeah. And Elizabeth, for you?
For me, it was interesting because I am a multicultural Latina. I'm of Mexican and Chilean heritage and born to a mother from Bolivia. And I actually went to all of these places. Some of them, almost all of them, for the first time when I went to Brazil, Mexico, and Chile. And I have an understanding and a recognition that while I'm in the US, there's this phenomena where all people who are not Anglo, who do not have white skin and blue eyes, are seen as quote unquote people of color or brown. It's like a brownification of all people. But if I go to Latin America, I have a really good understanding that I am perceived as a white person because I'm not perceived as an indigenous person. You can say that I'm a quote unquote mixed person. Historically and most recently I am, but in the dynamic of Latin America and throughout the Americas, I still operate as a white person. And there are different levels of whiteness, so it's very interesting. But just to bring it back, for example, and each place I went to, I was, because I'm multicultural, I was perceived in a different way. So when I went to Brazil, everybody thought I was Argentinian, which is interesting because on my South American side, I'm Chilean. And then when I went to Mexico, everybody thought I was more Chilena than I was Mexican. And then when I went to Chile, everybody thought I was Mexican. So it's very, very interesting to see the different ways that people perceive me. They perceive me different culturally wherever I went. But what stayed the same is that in all those places, they perceive me as more white. So very interesting. And then again, back in the US, I'm not perceived that way by many people. And some people might perceive me as that. So that's all I have to say.
That's really helpful. And I guess what's interesting is it comes back to what you were saying, and depending on where you are and what you're doing, how you're perceived. And I think it's an important conversation because it's these are the conversations we need to have, and what people feel comfortable with, and what what is respected. And so in some sense, it's your way of respecting indigenous people in the Latin American countries you're going to, and how you're perceived there. So I think that's really fantastic. I would like to also apologize because when I was reading Anissa's biography, it was a different Anisa. And so I just wanted to note that she is the product manager at the Peace Corps headquarters in Washington, D.C., and she is a Gilman Scholar. And she wrote a graphic novel as her experience working with Syrian and Iraqi refugees who escaped terrorism. So during the evacuation of 7,000 Peace Corps volunteers, she was the crisis hotline responder for COVID-19, which is fantastic. I mean, that is amazing work to be able to be on hand to do that. So Anisa, thank you for directing me to this. And again, I apologize. And I hope that we can connect. We can get you connected soon. What I also think is really important is that she was a consultant intern for the refugee empowerment at the Jordanian Trauma Recovery Center. And so it seems like you have a really good understanding of working with people, and similar to what Elizabeth and Sasha was saying, just perceptions really affect people. And I imagine that also, our surrounding environment shapes trauma too, or shapes our how the trauma that we have, but also how we can bounce back from that trauma, and how we recover from that trauma, which is really important. So thank you so much for sending that through. And I guess part of this makes me wonder, you know, there are going to be different perceptions, and I'm wondering if you guys face any discrimination of any kind. And Anissa, I'm just wondering if you could just, I mean, just a nod, like a yes or no. Did you face discrimination when you were abroad? Yeah, definitely. Okay. Oh my gosh, I hope we can get you connected because I would love to hear more of your story. But for now, Elizabeth, maybe if you could let us know, you know, was there any discrimination that you felt while you were abroad?
I think I unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry if you hear my cat in the background. She is meowing. But I personally, because I was in Latin America and I'm perceived as a person of privilege there because of the color of my skin, my passport, my nationality, all of that, I did not face discrimination over there in any of the countries that I went to. However, in the US, I also don't face racial discrimination because of the color of my skin, but I do face the barriers to the system that is oppressive to all people who are not of quote unquote Anglo origin. So yes, I didn't experience discrimination abroad. Here it's a little bit different, but again, it has nothing to do with the color of my skin.
That's helpful. Thank you. Yeah, there's so many different ways of experiencing discrimination, unfortunately. So it's important to make sure that we are doing our best to support each other and be open-minded. And we're all definitely learning about what we can do to be respectful and take care of each other. Sasha, how about you? How was your experience abroad? And your experiences, because I know you're the winner of multiple and also different locations, and so I imagine that it could vary from place to place.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd say in Japan, it was more so discrimination by ignorance, not necessarily very blatant, but assumptions that were made, and I was approached for them. And so what some people may say, like if they were coming from a good place or things of that nature. And in Germany, still also discrimination by ignorance, but it was a different type of discrimination than in Japan. Just because I feel like with Germany, there definitely is more discrimination that's blatant, I'd say. Blatant discrimination also happened to me in Germany from not necessarily Europeans, but also other people of color. So I faced kind of both sides of that. So more so questioning and just ignorance and like honest curiosity versus also blatant discrimination that was intentional discrimination.
Okay, yeah. I mean, that's pretty tough because it's varied experiences depending on where you are, and it can be difficult to respond to. And so that is certainly a challenge. And I'm wondering if there are any other challenges or surprises that you faced and how you responded to them. So Sasha, just building off of your own experiences. So definitely the discrimination you faced was a challenge, but were there any other surprises? And then how did you face them and deal with them?
Yeah, so I think some surprises for me were also being discriminated against by other groups of color. And even so in Germany, obviously there are many different backgrounds, people with different backgrounds, and the largest minority in Germany is the Turkish population. And although it's not the same group, there is anti-Blackness and plenty of other groups that don't identify as Black as well. But I think a surprise for me was discrimination from African Germans or people that also identify as Black because of my nationality and also because of my intersections. I'm Afro-Latina, so my family is from Haiti and Dominican Republic. So there were many if I told people that I was Black, they accepted that. If I told people I was Black and American, it was kind of hard for them to compile being both Black and American for some people. And then if I said I was Black and American and I spoke Spanish, they were very confused. So it was constantly kind of having to explain the different intersections and how people of my background are plentiful and they definitely do exist. And simply because someone may not be used to it doesn't mean it's something that's odd or something that that is weird in a sense.
Yeah. Well, and it can be difficult to be the individual that kind of shows, you're kind of like there to expose people to all the diversity that is in the US. But it also is an example of how powerful the Fulbright program is, because it's exposing other countries to, kind of pushing on and like challenging their notions of what someone from the US looks like or who that person is. And there's so much beautiful diversity here in our country. So it's really a wonderful aspect of the program, is like going abroad and showing people, this is the US, which is difficult too, though, because then you take on that burden, of course, because you're going to have to navigate that world, and that can be challenging. And Anisa, I'm looking through and I see that it shows that you were a Gilman Scholar during the Syrian refugee in 2016. Yeah, so I got that one right. And that you were an international consultant intern for refugee empowerment at Jordanian Trauma Recovery Center, which is amazing, and that you organized the meetings with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and dealing with women's empowerment initiatives with refugee camps and advocacy-based English language curriculum. And so I'm wondering, and again, this is kind of oh wow, maybe we, no, I don't hear you yet. But I guess what I'm wondering is, did you also, you said yes to facing discrimination, and you had challenges and surprises, and I imagine that was within the refugee camp, or was it more the broader community? It was a broader community. It's like just living within the broader community. Oh, it's both of them. I see. Yeah, both of them combined. That's a challenge, and also a challenge to try to sign language to you during or to try to communicate with you without sound. But you were being such a champ, and I really appreciate it, Anisa. Elizabeth, if you could just discuss any challenges or surprises that you encountered.
Sure. So I can speak to the challenges that is being, I guess, it's very interesting, again, to see this phenomena, because on my international education programs, and I'm pretty sure you all, Sasha and Anissa, might have experienced this as well too, but the cohort of people you go with if you've gone on an international program usually tend to be white, wealthy, more privileged. That is the world of international education. That's just who these institutions were created for. So people from historically underserved backgrounds, we don't really have access to that. So even on my programs, while I recognize that in the countries I was going to, I was not being discriminated against, I didn't have a problem being in those countries. It was more being in the cohort of those students, which I really struggled with, because we were still in the context of the US when I was with the cohort of the students. And within that cohort, there was a lot of, I guess, there was a lot of ignorance around race and ethnicity and respecting culture and respecting people just in general. So that was really hard to deal with, especially with the mindset that some students come with, or the background that they have, or even the lack of awareness that they come into these programs with. I think one of the hardest, or one of the most racially charged experiences I had was from another international student from Europe, who cited social Darwinism. He looked at me and told me that we should practice social Darwinism against me so that he can get the classes that he wanted. So that was very icky to deal with. But again, it's nothing like what other people experience with racial discrimination every day. But again, for me, it wasn't the local community or the local culture that I was like facing these struggles with. It was in fact the other international students, most of them who are white, wealthy, privileged, and who didn't have sophisticated understandings of race,
Yeah,
ethnicity,
that is such a
discrimination.
great
So
point, Elizabeth.
yeah.
I'm so glad you pointed that out because you're right. I mean, it's really important to go abroad and expose people to the diversity in the U.S., but it's also important that we expose people in the U.S. to the diversity in the U.S., you know, and especially in these programs, it seems like that's something that we are pushing for. That's like the whole point of the We Represent conference. It's like, how do you promote all the many different ways of diversity? And unfortunately, that does seem to be lacking. And it does remind me of, you know, oh, there's your cat. It does remind me of when I had done the Fulbright. I was fortunate to go to Ecuador, and it was 2017, 2018. And when we came together, it was just a seminar for all of the students to join. And with this seminar, somebody had come up with the phrase Fulbright So White, and it was just a reflection of that lack of diversity that was within its own program. And so really right now, I think people are recognizing that this is an issue that needs to be addressed. And that's partly because, you know, there's a lot of wealth of knowledge and in diverse areas with diverse people, and everyone brings a lot of power. So it's good to know. And on that note, I guess just maybe tools and resources from the exchange program. So what you thought would be helpful that other people who are listening in might find helpful. So if there are any tools or resources that you relied on while you were abroad. And Anissa, if you would like to, feel free to type in your response and I can read it too, if that's helpful. Yeah. So how about we start? Yeah, go ahead, Elizabeth. You're unmuted, so yes. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if that was a follow-up question for me or for everybody, so sorry, everybody. I'll just say briefly that unfortunately, while I was on my programs, I didn't get that type of support that I was looking for. None of us were prepared for this kind of information or for this type of experience to expect to, I guess, experience the shock of what it was to be in such a white program while abroad. So what I did was I went back to my home institution and I created those resources for students. And that's what inspired me to go on my professional path. So I was a peer advisor for my study abroad department. And I went in and I did a lot of outreach to support historically underserved students, including BIPOC students. And I wrote, I guess, kind of resource guides for them on what to expect, how to navigate when people, how to navigate the way they are perceived based on their race, ethnicity, nationality, and how to navigate that space, both in the institution and within the cohort. So.
Okay, yeah, that's fantastic. I didn't realize you created those resources. That's amazing. Way to see. And that's actually something I think it's really important and I see happening a lot. It's just there are lots of gaps that still need to be filled. And so people should see this as an opportunity. A lot of times I think it could be easy to think that you know, something's already been done. You know, that it's not needed, but there's so much that we need. There's so much input. So it's really wonderful to hear that you took on that lack of information or that lack of resources and created them for the institution that you were with. So that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And Sasha, how about you?
So it wasn't necessarily a resource from the Fulbright program itself, but more so from the alumni. When I found out that I had gotten my Fulbright grant, I immediately started kind of looking on social media for things that related to people who had gotten a grant, people who were getting ready to go abroad, things of that nature. And I found the Fulbright Affinity group. I found Fulbright Noir on Instagram. And immediately I thought that was just a really cool initiative that some Fulbright alumni had decided to put together. Essentially, Fulbright Noir is an affinity group for Black Fulbrighters, both grantees and alumni. And simply just it's a community where Black Fulbrighters can talk about our experiences, where we can touch base with one another if we are in need of anything, regardless of country. And luckily, when I had gone to Germany, my first month there, Fulbright Germany had held the diversity conference in Berlin, and Fulbright Noir spoke at that conference. So I actually got to meet the 4 alumni leaders who created Fulbright Noir, the entire group. And throughout that diversity conference, I actually got involved with them, and they held their own conference. Fulbright Noir held a conference that following year in Belgium. So I attended that conference and became networked with Fulbright Noir, and now I'm actually on the executive board for Fulbright Noir. So that is something that I definitely found that resource, and that was created by alumni who saw something that was missing and needed and created that for others to have that like kinship together.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's so beautiful. I really love that. And I think that's I mean, it seems like that's just the way to address a lot of these challenges. We just have to address them. And that's a beautiful way of seeing that and having that tool available to you, and then going and working with them further. On just to follow up on that, I inspired by Fulbright Noir, Vanessa Diaz and I actually co-founded the Fulbright Latinx. So very similarly, trying to provide that platform to enable people who are Latinx candidates or Latinx awardees to see, hey, there are people like me, and that's that's meant to empower. So that's fantastic. And here is Anissa. In her experience abroad, there were only 4 other Black students. And they were told that the first cohort with Black students through that particular program in Jordan. And they were treated very differently, especially for herself and the one other Black woman in the group. And was often told that she was not American, and her way to the University of Jordan in the morning, sometimes people would throw bottle tops at their legs and call them slaves in Arabic. And she was able to harness the fact that she was not perceived as American, but instead was perceived as Black Arab, and use it to empathize with other minority groups in Jordan. And she had the unique experience of being treated as if she was a minority in Jordan, which that is a great example of just seeing the challenges that people are dealing with, and then having to take them on your own. So thank you for sharing that with us, Anissa. That's and it's unfortunate too, because obviously like these are biases that happen all around the world, including in the US as well. And but having that empathy is really empowering as well. And it's tough. I mean, so maybe you might want to show, I mean, I guess that is one of the tools, right? So harnessing that experience to make something better out of it. Something else to consider. So and from Anissa, she was the only American who was able to visit the refugee camp in Jordan. So Americans were not allowed in because they assumed that you were at the refugee camp to work in the trash department. Oh my gosh, that's terrible. But at the same time, what an opportunity to be able to to visit something and to have that experience. Meanwhile, she was in there to do research for an international, or an INGO, an international organization. way to take advantage of that. Oh my gosh. And again, very hard experiences, but also seeing how to leverage them to try to make things right is wonderful. Thank you for sharing, Anissa. The next question is, which country did you go to and why? And we kind of touched upon that when you guys did your introduction. So I'm going to loop this in with the next question, which is, what were some of the strategies you used to choose your country? And I think that's especially as people are thinking about applying for these international grants, maybe sharing a little bit of your strategies would be helpful as well. And whoever would like to go, and Anissa, yep, keep typing in that response. I'll read it. How about Sasha, go ahead, because I know you've gone to quite a few different countries, so there's a rationale there.
Yeah, so for me, Germany was kind of a no-brainer. The reason I started learning German when I was younger, when I was 11, and the main reason why I started learning German is because I have a half sister. She's half German, and she was born and raised in Berlin. And when we were younger, we actually couldn't speak to one another because we spoke two different languages. So I started learning German so I could speak to my sister, and that kind of just snowballed into me learning more about this culture, learning more about the language itself. And so when I finished high school when I was 17, I got the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Scholarship to go to Germany for a year and to attend a high school there. So that was my first time ever leaving the country, and I had spent a year in Germany. And because of that year abroad, I decided that I wanted to study German as a language in college. And so when I went to college and it was my first day, I was choosing my classes. The person who was helping me select my classes said, okay, that's cool that you want to study German, but you also need a second language. And so I said, well, okay, I speak Spanish as well. Let me just take a Spanish class. And the person told me that all of the Spanish classes were full. And so I'm like, okay, well, what are my options? And so they tell me, well, you have Italian and Japanese. And I didn't want to learn Italian. And so I said, okay, well, I used to watch anime when I was younger. I guess I'll take Japanese. And I actually ended up really, really liking my Japanese class. And my Japanese professor told me that if I declared a minor, then I'd be able to go to Japan with the university. So I thought, okay, well, I want to go to Japan, so let me just declare a minor. So I ended up declaring a minor, and I had the opportunity. So I got the Gilman to go to Japan, and ended up graduating in 3 years with a major in German, a minor in Japanese. So for Fulbright, it was a no-brainer to choose Germany again, but then I was able to marry the kind of idea between German and Japanese because there actually are country similarities between the two. And so for my Fulbright grant, I was placed in the state of Germany that is the third highest Japanese population in all of Europe. So that was something that was really cool that I got to tie into because of this accident of learning Japanese.
Oh, it had the highest Japanese population, you said?
It's the third highest Japanese population after London and Paris.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. And so just out of curiosity, what are the similarities between Japan and Germany? You said there's a few similarities.
Yeah, so the two countries have a lot to do with each other just between finance and engineering. There's a lot of exchange between Japan and Germany. So yeah, like I mentioned, so after London and Paris, which are obviously two very large metropolitan cities, there's Dusseldorf, Germany, which a lot of people haven't heard of. But if you go to Dusseldorf, there's an entire area where all the signs are in Japanese. They're all Japanese businesses. And the school that I taught at through Fulbright was maybe 30 minutes away from Dusseldorf. So I got to go there pretty often. And every year there's a Japan Day in Germany, and it happens in Dusseldorf.
Wow, that's incredible. How wonderful that linked up. I had no idea. And I knew that you'd studied the two different countries, but I didn't realize how they were linked that way, which is incredible. And I'm also impressed, Sasha, you must speak it's like English, Spanish, German, Japanese. Are there any other languages?
Bits and pieces of others. I taught myself Swedish because I was bored. And there are just a few others that I speak, nothing too fluently, but yeah, so I don't claim to speak them fluently, but I do dabble in a few other languages. But those German, Spanish, Japanese, and English obviously are my big four.
That's really impressive. I'm going to read Anisa's response. So she said she chose to go to Jordan because she studied international relations at American University and focused on peace and conflict resolutions with a regional focus on Africa and Middle East. And the only two countries in the Middle East that they could travel to at the time was Morocco and Jordan. And since she worked her way through college as a low-income first-generation college student, she couldn't afford to study abroad for an entire semester because she couldn't afford to not earn income for an entire semester. And so the Jordanian summer program offered an internship program as well as a language focus, so she could continue to work and build her resume and be competitive for the job market her senior year of college. And she wanted to study abroad to show jobs that she had international experience and spoke a critical language. And she needed to go abroad in order to compete with more privileged classmates who had already done prestigious unpaid work abroad as volunteers or fellows. Yeah, I hear that, Anisa. I mean, that's the difficulty too, right? I think there's some struggle with the way that the programs are set up, where volunteer internships or, you know, unpaid internships give people an advantage, but those are the people who already have the funding or the money that they don't need to be paid. You know, I had to work, you know, with pizzas, you know, making pizzas and stuff, because there's no unpaid internship was not an option at the time. So I think it's important to recognize that there is that how to face that disparity, and this is a really strategic way of showing, hey, I can master this critical language, which was really impressive. So is that Arabic, Anisa? Is that correct? Yep. Okay, that's fantastic. That's really impressive. And Elizabeth, if you want, oh, let me just follow up. And now Anissa's working for the Peace Corps in DC, and she's actually currently on a temporary assignment assisting unaccompanied minors at the Mexican-American border. That's fantastic, especially dealing, and that's a huge refugee crisis. You know, it seems like it's building on a lot of your expertise, and dealing with what people are. And that's why she's on the phone in her car, of course. That makes absolute sense. We are so, oh my gosh. Oh, I see. It makes so much more sense. And we're so grateful that you could join us. We really are. Elizabeth, if you want to go ahead and share with us why you chose the countries you did.
Sure. So my very first study abroad experience was Brazil. I guess let me back it up first. So I was a first-gen low-income student at the University of California in Santa Cruz, and I had a really, really unique position. For being so low income, I earned a very special scholarship that covered 90% of my tuition to go to college. And the UC has a special program called UC EAP, where those financial aid packages to go to the UC apply to all of their study abroad programs. So when I found out that 90% of financial aid was going to apply to like covering 90% of the study abroad program too, I was like, I'm going to go. So that's why I decided to study abroad in the first place, because I was like, oh, I can afford this, because I was working 3 jobs and full-time student, and I was just over it. I needed to get away. And I chose Brazil because it is a country and a culture that I was really enamored by. I really loved the language. I wanted to learn more about the culture. So I went there first, and it's very interesting because while I was there, I actually learned Portuguese first before I learned Spanish. And I'm a multicultural Latina. And while I was on my program, I felt very out of place, because there were other Latinas on the program who were so well connected to their heritage and to their culture and their language. And then I was the one who I felt like I didn't have a better sense of myself. So while I was there, I got comments about me not. One person actually told me that it was shameful that I didn't know how to speak Spanish, and it kind of hit me. I was like, why am I here learning about another culture and another country, which is beautiful, but maybe I should take a step and like take some time to learn about my own. So I went to Brazil. That was great. And while I was there, I actually, my mom she found out that she had a sister living in Chile who she didn't know about. She didn't know that her sister existed, because my mom was born in Bolivia, and she has her family back in Chile that left during the dictatorship. So I booked a plane ticket to Chile in my last week in Brazil. I went to go meet my family for the first time. And while I was there, I spoke a really bad portañol, so like a mix of Portuguese and Spanish. And I felt really ashamed, and it was super hard. Like, okay, I need to go. I made a plan. I said, I need to go. I need to master Spanish so I can come back and really reconnect with my family. So from there, I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to my university, take all the Spanish courses. Then I'm going to study abroad in Mexico, reconnect with my paternal cultural side there. And then I'll come back to Chile. My Spanish will be good. And then I can reconnect with my family here. So that was kind of my strategy. And again, I mentioned the part about how my financial aid covered almost everything. And on top of that, I won $20,000 in scholarships, including the Gilman Scholarship. So I was able to afford studying abroad and not having to stress about the finances, which was a really unique opportunity for me. So that was my strategy behind it. I chose to be a heritage seeker, and it was really special and unique.
Yeah, that's so fantastic. Very similarly, when I had gone to Ecuador, it was again to practice my Spanish. And it is interesting the shaming that happens, even though it's my great grandparents that are from Mexico. If you can't speak Spanish, there's just, why can't you speak Spanish? Where as people's grandparents might be from Germany and they can't speak German, but it's not the same expectations. And so, but still, that drove me. I was like, I need to learn Spanish. And if I was like Sasha, I'd be like, I need to learn all the languages. So maybe next time. I guess the other question is the program. So the specific programs, and I know Sasha, you have a number of programs, and so thinking about why you chose the program you did, and Elizabeth and Anissa, just for the Gilman and or any other programs that you were part of, why you chose that program specifically. So Elizabeth, if you want to start.
Sure, so I'll share. I won the Gilman to go to Chile. And like I mentioned a little bit before, I had heritage seeking reasons to want to go to Chile and also practice my Spanish or learn in Spanish. I went to university and just took all my courses in Spanish. So it was a cultural immersion experience. But the deeper reason that I was there was to reconnect with my family and my heritage, and also get a better understanding of what happened to my family and why we're not there anymore, and what happened to me as a person. I felt so detached from all my cultures, and it turns out it was due to political crisis. So it was a unique opportunity for me to really understand the history of what happened and what happens to people all around the world who are separated from their cultures and from their families due to political crises. So while I was at the university in Chile, I could pick whatever classes I wanted. I studied anthropology in college, and I didn't have to fulfill any credits while I was there for my major or for my GE. So I chose to study trauma and political violence, Chilean history, all about the dictatorship. So that's why I chose Chile.
That sounds really powerful. I'd only been, understanding the trauma there, I think that's a really again, powerful experience, especially everything that's gone on. So wonderful, and connecting to the heritage. So it's a kind of a beautiful combination. And Sasha, how about for you, the program specifically? So we know why you chose the countries you did. How about the various programs?
So when I was younger, I had always wanted to study abroad, but it just wasn't feasible for my family financially. I also come from a low-income background, and my mother is a single mother, and she was raising 3 children. So I'm of those 3, and I had these huge goals of traveling abroad to all these different countries, and my mom's just trying to put food on the table for 3 kids. So she's like, how am I going to send you to Japan? So I didn't think it was feasible when I was in middle school and high school, but then I met a German exchange student at my high school when I was in 11th grade. And she told me of the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange Scholarship, because there's a German version, which is the exact opposite. The Germans go to the US and it's completely paid. And in German, it's called the PPP Scholarship. And so she told me about that, and I thought it sounded fantastic. I was like, this is my key. This is it. This is what I need. And so that's exactly why I looked into the Congress Bundestag Youth Exchange. And I told my mom about it. I said it's a completely fully paid scholarship to spend a year in Germany. And she thought this was fantastic. She's like, if you win that, then I don't have to pay anything. Go ahead. So that's one reason why I did Congress Bundestag. And then for Gilman specifically, my program to Japan was a summer program. And I had a hard time finding a lot of scholarships that were solely just for short-term programs. So Gilman specifically stood out to me just because I wasn't going for a year. I was only going for a few months. And I ended up getting that one as well, which is fantastic. And then for Fulbright, I was talking to a friend of mine who I did Congress Bundestag with, and my friend is in Germany now, and she's made her life there. And then she mentioned to me, like, oh yeah, I came back to Germany using the Fulbright. You should totally apply for it, because since you're a CBYX alum, this should be a shoo-in for you. And I thought, like, I'd heard of Fulbright before, and I was like, oh no, me getting a Fulbright, that's not going to work. Fulbright is way too prestigious. I don't have the credentials for that. But then I looked more into it, and I said, you know what, let me just apply for it. And I told my best friend about it as well. And my best friend said, you know what, let's apply for it together. And we both ended up getting the Fulbright for the same year. So I went to Germany, and my best friend went to Austria. And that actually worked out perfectly.
Yeah, I mean, because I believe Europe is just so easy to travel around. So it was fairly close, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
I got to go to Vienna, which was really cool. And then she got to visit me in Germany.
That does sound amazing. I mean, I think it's such a good point. It seems like, you know, I know, and I always wanted to study abroad, and I had to wait quite some time and do something abroad. And I actually waited until I got, you know, was working, and then was able to save up money and could then go, you know, on, you know, pay for it myself. But it's also comes back to that idea of exposure. Like, who would have ever known that these programs exist? So it's really fantastic that, you know, the people who are joining us now are learning about the programs we're discussing and other opportunities, and probably like pushes people to look to see what opportunities that are paid for, because I think that's the opportunity that both you and your mom are probably very grateful for. So wonderful. Thanks for sharing. And I love Sasha, because it makes me think, oh my gosh, I didn't know these programs existed and all of these opportunities, and you just took advantage, which is fantastic. It's wonderful. And so for Anissa's says that she chose the Gilman Scholarship because her older brother had received the Gilman when he was in college. Oh, that's also good exposure, right? Seeing what the older siblings up to. And so as a low-income student, she quickly became an expert at applying for scholarships and grants when she was in college. Yes. And at the time, summer programs at American University were ineligible for Gilman. Were ineligible, and Gilman was one of many scholarships I applied for. So the American University, so Gilman was ineligible, or? Oh, no. So, okay, I'm going to keep going. So she received multiple scholarships to fund the summer program abroad. Shout out to Gilman, who provided the bulk of the finance. Oh, summer programs were now eligible for financial aid of any kind. Thank you. Oh, I see. And so Gilman helped fund that. Thank goodness. That's really wonderful. And then ultimately she was able to go abroad for free because of Gilman, and was able to have the experience of a lifetime. So actively being involved and learning from peace and conflict resolution during a war in the Middle East, while studying for a degree in peace and conflict resolution at the American University in DC. That's actually perfect. And it seems like it's well paired with the work that you're doing, and has really literally driven you to where you are right now in your car. And I think this has actually been really valuable, and also such diverse experiences, but you know, beautiful. And so I you know, I guess it's really interesting because A, it's wonderful to speak to all of you and to learn more about your stories, but B, it shows a number of very different but all very exciting pathways forward, and all of the different opportunities that going abroad with these different programs offer. And so I guess this next question is, if you could do it again, what country would you choose? And I don't know who, anyone can go first. Feel free. It can be, Anissa can't go first because it's going to take her a minute to write that explanation. But whoever else wants to jump in, feel free.
I think, well, I'm definitely glad that I chose the countries that I did, because it had such an effect on who I am and what I do now. And I do believe that if I were to choose any other country, I probably wouldn't be where I am now. But if the chance presented itself and I was able to spend an extended period of time in another country, I'd probably choose Ghana. I went to Ghana for 2 weeks when I was visiting just from Germany on break, and it was the quickest 2 weeks of my life. It went by so fast, and I had such a great time there. And I made a bunch of friends. I even started learning the language a bit. and
Of course you did.
I itching to go back, and I'm waiting for just the opportunity to have the time and a longer amount of time to go to Ghana. And so I do honestly believe I would spend like a year or so there, then it would have been a great experience.
Oh, that does sound wonderful. I do recall you sharing some of the stories of you going to Ghana, and what I do remember is it's because you had friends who were from Ghana in Germany, correct?
Yeah. And so a lot of the what my research topic that I'm doing in my master's program is the Afro-German community, and a large population of the Afro-German community is from Ghana. So a lot of my friends in Germany were of Ghanaian descent. So what they were either born there or their parents were from there. And in Germany, I got to know so many Ghanaians, and I'd gone over their houses. They'd cook for me. We'd go to parties. I listened to the music, and I was like, okay, this country is amazing. I need to go. And so I ended up going, and then I came back, and all of my friends called me an honorary Ghanaian because sometimes I knew more Tree than they did. Tree is the language that they speak. So I definitely was adopted by the Ghanaian community when I was in Germany. So I definitely fell in love with it.
Oh my gosh, yes. No, that sounds wonderful. Good. I mean, and it's good to keep on top of everybody's minds. And I imagine it's because people are having these conversations, right, as they're applying and they're trying to figure out where should we go? How do we decide? And again, it's kind of, what you want to explore, how it ties into your interests, but also, things that you're not as familiar with, that you only get a taste of and you'd like to dive in. How about Elizabeth? How about you?
If I could go on a program again, I would go back to Chile. I don't think I would go to a different country. There's so many different countries out there with beautiful, beautiful cultures, but I still feel like I have unfinished work to do in Chile. So that's why I would go there. But I would like to do the Fulbright in Chile. And I feel like the year I spent there was just the tip of the iceberg. So while I was there, I did a lot of, I became a family historian by accident. I just started asking a lot of questions, and I became a family historian and a genealogist and all of this. And I'm also a creative writer as well. And I'm also very interested in the impacts of intergenerational trauma and political violence and how that shows up in generations to come. So I'm just putting this out there. Okay, universe, you have to listen to me. I want to win the Fulbright so I can go to Chile, so I can either write my book and or do research on the impacts of political violence and intergenerational trauma, and the way that different health issues come up for Chileans. For example, while I was in Chile, I actually got really sick. I had to go to the hospital, and I ended up needing therapy for the first time. And after months and months of testing, they found that I was experiencing hyperthyroidism from stress. I basically had a nervous breakdown while I was there. And it's really interesting because I think 1 in 3 Chileans have thyroid issues. The highest rate of depression, mental health issues, thyroid issues, all of these things. And I'm very interested in studying and learning more about that because I'm not even from Chile. I was born in the US. My grandparents are from Chile. But still, these histories of violence and trauma still impact me today. I mean, it could be the genetics. Maybe all Chileans just have something wrong with their thyroid, but I think there's something more there. So I'm really interested in doing that. And also writing the book that I want to do, which has nothing to do with the research, but more so with
Yeah, you know what? I think that's actually so many good points, and back to just how our own experiences kind of navigate our pathway, and that's why a lot of our paths are very different, and yet it comes back to what's fed and led into that, which is really neat. And you also point out some very interesting pieces of health and how health, whether stress is connected to health, which so many studies do show that stress does influence our health greatly. And that also points back to what Anissa has raised, which is that studying abroad may never look the same due to the new world of COVID. And it's wild to think of where to travel, considering health and safety at such a precious time. And so something else to consider is just, what about the programs? And so, as you noted, Elizabeth, you would like to do Fulbright, that would be the next thing. And there could be other programs, but also, especially in this time, because even though as the US is emerging from this, perhaps, depending on Delta, but as we're emerging, and as we're, hopefully able to send vaccinations around the globe, but they're just not there yet. And I know that in certain areas in the continent of Africa, they think there's like a, 5% or less vaccination rate. I mean, this is a very real, serious issue that we're still contending with. And so thinking even maybe local programs, right? I mean, Peace Corps, or what can be done that can help locally and really like pushing outward too. So thinking about programs that we would want to do in the future, and maybe thinking more like, what programs would you do if you could do it in the very near future? And then maybe, once things are underway and hopefully the world is back on track in a few years. But Anisa also notes that she would do it all over again though. And it was a life-changing experience that really taught her so much about who she is. And she's now working with refugee children right here in the US because she had her Gilman experience. And if she could do another trip, though, she would study abroad in France. And France has a unique immigration history, particularly with Black or Muslim communities. And she wants to channel her inner James Baldwin or Eartha Kitt, both African Americans who both sought refuge in France too. And also, and I know this because France, they did not allow for slavery at the time, and so there was a lot of freedoms that people in the U.S. did not have, which I think was beautiful to see. So that would be an interesting experience for sure. And I think it also kind of, Anisa, to your point that this is the work you're doing now locally, and so now you're thinking, a few years in the future, you would like to go to France. That would be a very interesting experience, and connecting it to what you have experienced. And you noted here, I've missed this, that Eartha Kitt, apologize, and I thought Eartha Kitt. So that and you're talking about escaping American racism and oppression, and it is interesting, right? Because how much of that can we actually escape by going abroad? How much of that is, do we see the reflection of what has already been amplified here in the US? And so, but I think it does trigger different areas that need to be worked on and how we can better do that. So I don't know, Elizabeth, you had noted that you would like to go back for Fulbright to Chile, and it's a very interesting. Sasha, do you have any idea of if you'd want to do, you were saying Ghana, but is there any particular program you're looking into? I imagine Fulbright Scholar.
I actually considered maybe doing a second Fulbright and perhaps going to Ghana and doing a second Fulbright. I wasn't sure if I would do research or English teaching. When I went to Germany, I was applied for the English teaching grant, and that's the one that I had. So I was on the fence whether I should apply for research or English teaching. I know each country has different grants depending on what the situations are in the country. So that was one thing that I was also thinking of looking into, maybe just a second Fulbright.
That would be amazing, a second Fulbright. That is inspiring. I want to apply for a second Fulbright too. Yeah, and I think also fantastic because of the interest, and I see the links there, and it all seems to go and wind up full circle with Germany and Japan and all of the interlinkages and the friendships and relationships that you were able to build. What I'm also wondering is, you guys have talked a little bit. And Anisa saying Chile. She's wishing on a star for a first Fulbright. Oh yeah, go for it. Definitely. Yes, the first Fulbright's for sure. And I think that there's a lot of potential. And you guys are experts with the application process and knowing how to write for those grants and get those scholarships. So, but I think what's important to note for everyone is that it just takes practice, right? And so not that it's out of reach, but if you don't get it the first time, then try again, because it's just important to practice and put yourself out there. So then the other question I wanted to, and all of you have touched upon this a bit. I know Anissa's described this as well, but the impact of the study exchange programs on your careers, and then also the impact of the study abroad how it might have changed your personal life. So again, Anissa, I know that you've already discussed where it's brought you now, but if you want to, feel free to go into any details. And Elizabeth, if you want to, just explain how that might have affected your career path or your personal life as well.
Sure. So it changed everything for me, actually. I guess I'll just back it up just a little bit. But back in high school, I didn't think that somebody like me can go to college, let alone study abroad. It was never on my radar. I had no idea. And then when I got to college, I just walked into an orientation for EOP students about how they can study abroad. So like first-gen low-income students like me. And that was it. At the time, I didn't think anything of it. But then since then, I've gone abroad 4 times on prestigious programs at prestigious universities with international students who are probably like the elite of their institutions. So when I came back to my host institution or the in-betweens, having that study abroad experience allowed me to become a study abroad peer advisor. And I did everything I could to support historically underserved students in my position. One of my, the advisors at the university kind of mentioned to me, they're like, you are not like an intern. You do so much more than just what's required of an intern. I went above and beyond to implement things like DEI initiatives to better support historically underserved students, particularly undocumented students, queer students, BIPOC students, first-gen low-income students. A lot of these areas that the study abroad department at my institution, they weren't working to better support. And from that, I have decided to start my own business, offering some of the same services that I did while I was an intern to other institutions, particularly doing website writing and video orientation creation for these types of students with all the information that they need to know.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I mean, again, it seems to be really beautiful how these experiences have, shown you what's missing and what's needed, and has influenced and guided your path forward, which is fantastic. And a number of different opportunities it seems is open for you. How about for you, Sasha?
Yeah, so definitely studying abroad changed everything for me, just like with Elizabeth. I would not be in a German master's program if I hadn't gone to Germany. And I remember when I first came back from my first year abroad with CBYX, that was my first time out of the country, and I decided to leave for an entire year. So I had a roller coaster of emotions, being 17, 18, a foreign country. And I remember when I came back, I told myself, oh, I'm never going back to Germany. I had such a crazy experience. I'm going to stay in the US, and that's not for me. And then I noticed a few months later, I started missing it. And I was like, oh, I might have to go back. We'll think about this. And lo and behold, I go back. And I've noticed that my relationship to Germany has changed as I've gone there, as I've gotten older. So I went to Germany again during my undergrad and once more after undergrad. And now it definitely is a second home. And as I mentioned before, I would not be studying German or interested in the smaller communities, minority communities in Germany had I not studied abroad with Fulbright, had I not met the people that I met in Germany. So it's had all of the effect on my life.
Yes, yes. I know, even our personal relationships, huh? And then I'm gonna wait. I don't have anything coming through from Anisa. Checking to see. Oh, here it comes. I didn't know if you were frozen, so I'm glad it came through. So studying abroad in Jordan taught her so much about herself, and it oddly gave her a sense of peace, knowing that Black experiences she had as an African American and a Caribbean American in America may always happen in other may always happen in other countries, and she may never have been perceived as enough of anything, but she had to quickly flip that narrative for herself. Yes, you did. Write your own narrative. I love that. And it's not that she's not enough. It's more that she's enough. She's more than enough. And in fact, she's extra. Sneaking into refugee camps as a trash worker to do research was more than enough. Absolutely. I think that is such, I am so, yeah, what a wonderful story to share. And again, like, you know, kind of an unfortunate setting or an unfortunate foundation, but really wonderful to see how you've lifted yourself up to solve the challenges, and that's beautiful. So, we only have 3 minutes left, so it's about a minute for each of you. And I just wanted to touch on this one last question, which is, what is your recommendation for people preparing to study abroad? So we literally have 2 minutes. So briefly, recommendations for others who want to study abroad. Sasha.
Yeah, really quickly. For apply for all of them, apply for all the opportunities that you can and see which ones you get. Even if you don't think you'll get it, apply, because you may be surprised and you may go abroad and have the time of your life. So literally apply for everything.
That's wonderful. And Anisa says, I recommend for people studying abroad to know that you have already earned the right to be there. You're not asking or begging for money. Yes, that's absolutely right. You definitely have the talents to do so. And Elizabeth. Oh, you might still be muted. Or can you guys
I
hear?
just wanted to mention that Anisa also said you were demanding to be paid your worth. Yes. I would just say that for everybody. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep.
I just said that Anisa mentioned you are demanding to be paid your worth, and I really agree with that. I also want to mention to anybody who's interested.
Oh, you're muted now, Elizabeth. But we caught the said demanding to be paid for what you're worth, which is absolutely true. And then if anybody is interested, there is one other piece. Oh, to apply. I imagine. Yeah, definitely apply. And I think it's really important for people to realize that everyone brings their own strengths, everyone brings their own experiences, and they're all valuable. And I think, you might not have the same experiences as everyone here on the panel, but it's just as Anisa said, we create our own narratives, and you need to highlight what your strengths are so people know why you dominate. And the people here on the panel have been able to convey their strengths, and you are able to too. And if it takes several attempts, take those chances, practice writing, editing, and make sure that you're able to let the world know why you should go abroad. And I think we hope to see many of you working on those applications, but we also hope to see the world coming to a better space soon, and hopefully we can merge from this. So thank you all for joining. We lost Elizabeth